Welcome to the House of Hoosier podcast. I'm your host, as always, AJ Guyton. Got my main man, Austin Platt, here with me. How you doing, Austin?
Doing well, man. It's been another week in the books and a solid bounce back for Indiana last night.
Definitely, man. And on your note, man, sounds like you got an opportunity to do something. I saw on Twitter. What was that all about?
I was nominated for an IBS award for a radio play-by-play did earlier this year for IU soccer. So I'm most likely headed to New York City in February for the finals for that. So I'm really excited and really honored to receive that award.
Hey, man, what my man Martin used to say, you like a man smoking at a gas station. You about to blow up, man. So, hey, man, congratulations, and looking forward to seeing you, man, as you continue to do your dream, man. And I know it's fun. I've had opportunity to work in my dream, so I know it's how that makes you feel to be able to wake up and do what you love to do. So, man, let's get to IU, man. So we haven't been since the Rutgers game, so I want to kind of start there before we get to the Nebraska game. As you all well know, IU lost to Rutgers 63-48 at Rutgers, and it's a place that IU hasn't won in the TJD era and has had struggles with Rutgers. And as a coach and a former player, I could see why. It's not an easy place to play, and especially on the road. It's not an easy strategy to play against, man. And, as I watched the game, I was able to watch the game and watch the tremendous job that Rutgers and Coach Pike the game plan they were able to execute on Trayce Jackson-Davis and living with certain things when it comes to offensively for Indiana. Rutgers was able to, live with certain things. And it was Rutgers' defense that carried that game, limiting to Indiana to only 48 points. Man, and 24% shooting from three, 30% from the field, 57% from the line. You're just not going to win many games unless you're playing against, eighth graders as grown men. So before we get started, man, what were your thoughts about that game as you watched it?
It kind of looked like last year's team, to be quite honest. They did not have the real will to win. I felt like I was put in a time machine and I was back in February of 2022 because they showed no fight, really. They were out tough from the very beginning. And it did not look like a team that was coming off of one of their biggest wins of the season against North Carolina. So we saw this last year. Indiana gets a big win against Purdue, and then the next game they kind of fall flat against Michigan. Felt like the same thing, to be quite honest. And Rutgers did an excellent job of doubling Trayce Jackson-Davis, and there was really not a lot that he could really do. And to be honest, the shots just weren't falling. 48 points, the least amount of points Indiana scored in the Mike Woodson era. Nothing was working defensively. They couldn't get the stops when they needed to, and somehow the rack always proves to be it's been a house of nightmares lately for Indiana, and that was not the game you wanted. Of course, you wanted to start 1-0 in Big Ten play and play off that huge win against UNC, but it wasn't there, and it looked like a much different team than the one we saw last night. But it was pretty disappointing seeing that, and I guess the road struggles and the concerns that we had coming into this year continued at least for that game.
Absolutely, man. And, I think one thing as a fan and as a player and as a coach, former coach, I never get excited about wins. I never get excited about wins and losses. You have to stay even keel. And after the North Carolina game, everybody's up and, we're going to win that championship. We're going to go to Final Four. I said, man, it's such a long season. And it's a long season for North Carolina as well. I mean, they go from being number 1 all the way out, or number 25 in the polls or whatever they are. So you have to stay even keel, man, because the next game is the most important game. And, what Rutgers did, going on the road in the Big Ten, I've been saying that since I've been doing this podcast for about 3 years. It's not about what we do in the preseason. It's about what you do in that Big Ten season. And the most important part of it is to protect home court and to be able to get wins on the road. And the road is difficult because, just annoyingly officials and people, they allow teams to play a lot more aggressively than you would if you were on your own home floor and they're playing that aggressively against you. There will be fouls. There will be moans from the crowd. There will be moans from the head coach. And head coaches tend to keep quiet on the road because they don't want to be perceived as crying about calls. So Rutgers was able to impose their will defensively. They were able to get into our guys. They were able to force us to take shots that we didn't want to take. They were able to double Trayce aggressively, even without Amori being in the lineup most of the first half. They were able to neutralize Trayce by double teaming him, and guys were just not taking shots and willingly taking shots or making shots other than Miller Kopp. And that's, to me, has been the issue with the team. Like you said, being put in the time machine the last few years, that has been the issue with this team. It's not about even making shots. It's about the unwillingness to really take them and the hesitation. And he who hesitates is lost. And that's what I was seeing from that team from Indiana against Rutgers. In order to make shots, you have to be confidently willing to take them, whether you just missed the first one or not. You can, wrap it up as a bad game, or you can wrap it up as I knocked them in. So you have to be confident on the road. And without JHS in the lineup, we got a little bit of old X, you know what I mean? So, that showed me that JHS is very important to X because it allows X to play free basketball and not thinking basketball. And so when he has to be the only guy to make every decision, initiate offense, we get 6 turnovers. And that's what we can't do on the road. One thing you can't do on the road is get out rebounded and have more turnovers than the other team. What did you think about the lack of JHS and how that affected Indiana?
The Indiana's offense really last year, it felt like every time you needed Trayce Jackson-Davis to get a touch. And this year he doesn't need that because of the playmaking of Jalen Hood-Schifino. And we saw this against North Carolina. The first few minutes in that game was very nerve-wracking. I think everyone on the floor was kind of feeling the nerves, of course, that awesome atmosphere. Mm-hmm. And Jalen Hood-Schifino is able to create offense that no one else on the floor can really do with that jump shot of his. He does not need a lot of space in order to get off a shot. And most of the time it goes in, which is very important. And he's the guy you want if Indiana's kind of in a rut and kind of what was like an 18-0 run at one point that Rutgers was in. And Jalen Hood-Schifino would be that guy that can take the ball up the floor and make a jump shot to silence the crowd. And Indiana doesn't have that now. Without Jalen Hood-Schifino. I know Trey Galloway's looked really good last night, and he's a great guy to have off the bench. Feels like he's going to be Indiana's 6th man, but without Hood-Schifino, you mentioned it, X feels like he has to do it all. Mike Woodson said he doesn't have to do that this year, especially if JHS is on the floor, but on Saturday, Indiana had no offense. They had no versatility to score points, and Miller Kopp's 3-pointers were huge. That kept Indiana in it for a lot of the game. I mean, it was a 33-33 ball game in the second half after Indiana was down by, I believe, 7 at the break. So they still had a chance to win that game, and then that huge run just basically ran them right out of the building. But Hood-Schifino is such a huge asset to Indiana's offense, and there's a reason why they scored under 50 points for the first time since the 2020 season in Maui. So he's such a huge part. Of course, last night was a different story. They really didn't need him all that much, but he's such a huge part of why this offense is going to be much more improved this year because of the way he can create a quick shot and doesn't need all that much space in order to hit one.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you look at the numbers, man. 4 assists, 6 turnovers for Johnson. 0 for 7, 2 turnovers. 0 for 3 from Race Thompson. We'll talk about him. 0 for 8 for Geronimo. He just looked out of sync because, you could tell he's just not getting a lot of minutes. So the inability of not getting a lot of minutes means I'm going to be out of rhythm, especially when I'm thrown into a fire at the rack. And so he just looks all out of sorts. So, and the Rutgers backcourt kind of dominated. I mean, McConnell, Derek Simpson, they combined for 30 points. I mean, when you're getting nothing from our backcourt and you're getting everything from their backcourt, on the road, that spells, trouble for Indiana basketball. So, they held us, like I said, 30%, 24%, 57%, just not going to win that game. And, I hope it was a wake-up call. Not a wake-up call. I don't want to say, well, it's too early for that, but I hope it was an opportunity for those young guys and, the rest of the teammates to feel what it was like to be in an intense atmosphere in the Big Ten. You have to be on point. You have to be focused. You have to be locked in, and you have to be confident. And that's the bottom line. If you're not confident, then you're going to struggle on the road. And like you said, I couldn't say it any better, man. Just looked like, somebody put you in a time machine. He was watching the same team over and over again. And we talked about that because they had the same attempts from 3 that they had last year. Last time we talked on this podcast about Indiana basketball, and that worried me. I said, man, we should be putting up a little bit more shots. We should be shooting with a lot more confidence. Maybe missing or making. We got, in order to make shots, we got to take them. And I wasn't seeing us taking. We're just relying on throwing it inside. So, and that leads us into Nebraska, man. We finally we had a great game against Nebraska last night where we had 4 players in double figures. We had another player where Race Thompson with 9 points, led by Galloway's 20, TJD's triple double, which is great to talk about because that has not happened in Indiana basketball, but only 2 other times. And and it was a great effort. We caught Nebraska reeling; they were without their point guard, so I mean that automatically changes everything when you take the point guard out of it. As you can see for Indiana as well, when we took our point guard out of it at Rutgers, we were out of it, for a while. It takes a while to kind of get going, and by that time you're probably down 15-20. So, and the same thing happened to Nebraska. Not saying that they would have not lost by 20. Indiana did play well. Indiana did impose their will, and they did look a lot more confident offensively as Galloway was able to come into the lineup and provide a spark. Kopp was solid. Bates had a career high or 19. He shot the ball with a lot of confidence, man, and it was what we expected. We had to have a bounce back game. That's what you have to do in conference play. Next game, just like coaches always hollering next play, he always hollering next game, man. So, were you at the game last night? Okay, so what were your thoughts about how Indiana bounced back against Nebraska?
This was the game Indiana needed, and the last few years it feels like the first game is always Nebraska at home in conference play, which is strange the way that lines up. But this was a solid game for Indiana, considering that kind of both teams are in kind of the teeth of their schedule. Nebraska is a team that is projected to finish last. We know last year they were not a very successful team. They had a big win against Creighton. They came in on a win streak. They got a tough schedule ahead as well, and Indiana's the same way with those 2 tough games last week with Rutgers and UNC, and then, of course, looking ahead to Arizona and Kansas the next 2 games. So this was really get a huge win for either team and build that momentum going into some tough games, and that's exactly what they did. They got off to an awesome start, really nice job, used the home crowd to their advantage, and basically put Nebraska away pretty early. I know the Cornhuskers, they stayed in it for much longer. They had some solid runs to kind of keep them afloat, and that allowed kind of Trayce Jackson-Davis to go back into the game late and finish off that triple-double of his to make some history. But huge contributions everywhere, as you mentioned. Trey Galloway with one of his best games. It's so rewarding for him to see that 3-pointer go down. He's done so much work in the offseason to really boost his game in that sense, and he looks that much more confident, which is huge for Indiana. We got 4 guys in double figures without Jalen Hood-Schifino. That's a recipe for success, considering we didn't see a lot of that really at all last season. And it's just awesome to see Trayce Jackson-Davis put his name in the history books, moves up in the scoring and rebounding records in Indiana history. And it's good to see Miller Kopp with another double-digit game. Tamar Bates, an awesome sight for him to see, 19 points. And then, of course, Galloway as well. So the bench guys really proving that Indiana has a much deeper bench, and we're seeing that firsthand. Is really rewarding to see, considering all the talk there was about this team, and it felt like they finally put their money where their mouth is, and awesome to see those guys make huge contributions. And it's great when you don't really need Jalen Hood-Schifino in that game, even though they were trying to get him to play. Just like Rutgers, he was kind of a game-time decision, but we figured in this game he wasn't going to go, but it didn't look like they missed him at all, which is awesome to see.
I mean, the 3 things for me that were important were Galloway's performance, TJD's performance, able to just be patient, being double. When you're a guy who's scoring 20 points a game, you could get impatient and you want to take shots that you don't need to take. But he was able to, for the first time, he's able to kick it out, and people were making shots. So it equated to a triple-double for him. But also the fact that we made 11 threes and we took 25. That means that it's confidence, means that we took some finally, and we finally made some. At the end of the day, a lot of times we finish, 3 for 12. We finish 4 for 15. Like, we got to put them up. This is the name of the game today. This is not threes beat twos. Threes are the new dunks. Threes can change the game and change the momentum of a game and get a team back in it or put a team out of it. And I think Indiana has to continue not to focus on that's the only thing we do, but it's a big part of what needs to happen for Trayce Jackson to be successful individually and for the team to be successful at the end of the game. So the efficiency 11 of 25 with Bates leading the way and Galloway making a couple was important to me, man. And what I would like to talk about is, what I love what Woodson has done, but I've always preached this. This game is about floor spacing. That's what it's about. And I've always said it, and I love Race Thompson. I think he's an outstanding player. and I want him to succeed. But I think Race needs to come off the bench. Now, this is my personal opinion. And here's the reasons. Number one, he's not playing up to Race standards. Had a decent game last night, but we need that game against Rutgers. You know what I mean? So I want him to get his confidence back. I want to get him to get his confidence up. And I want him to come off the bench because to me, him and Trayce are kind of the same player. They're the same player. There are guys, I remember Archie Miller used to throw it to Race in the post, back to the basket, he used to score. But with Trayce Jackson in there, it's not going to happen very often. So in the second unit, maybe you could go to him more with him and Malik Renew playing together, and he could become more of a focal point where he can get his offensive game and confidence back. What it would help the first unit is it would allow for Galloway to get into the starting lineup with JHS, with XJ, and with Miller Kopp. I see an opportunity for slashing and creativity at the other position. So that could help Trayce. That's stuff that you cannot prepare for as a team. So right now, teams can easily prepare for Indiana. They can come in and say, you know what, we're gonna just double team Trayce Jackson-Davis. We're gonna allow Race Thompson to shoot 4 or 5 threes. We're gonna see, Miller Kopp's gonna make some. He's just not gonna make enough to beat us. Xavier may make 1 or 2. We're cool with that. Make him shoot quicker. He may miss some. And I think that this will help us get off the better starts against better teams. What are your thoughts about the lineup? Do you see a change in the lineup that might help? Do you like it the way it is, and they think they should just, get used to playing the way they are? I want us to know from your perspective what you thought.
Yeah, I definitely think that there's an argument for changing the lineup, and this was a huge conversation last year. And I think if there's a guy you're going to sit, you're absolutely right. It's going to be Race Thompson. And last year we saw his contributions because not every game Trayce Jackson-Davis was doubled, especially in conference play, and that allowed for that pass down low to the baseline where Race usually was, in the short corner sometimes, takes a few dribbles and then puts it in an easy layup or a dunk. That's with the buddy ball that Mike Woodson has always talked about last year. Now with all these double teams, that's not going to really be available, and especially opponents are going to double Trayce and then put someone, right on Race Thompson or Malik Renew. They don't want to give up an easy 2. They'd rather have a team that historically has not been as good recently from outside shooting to take that 3-point shot, especially if it's really anyone else other than Miller Kopp, because I think opponents will look at Indiana's scouting report and say, hey, we'll give an open shot to kind of anyone but Miller Kopp because he's really the only guy that's known for his 3-pointers now that Parker Stewart is gone. So I like your argument there. I like a switch up, and I like to have, a veteran off the bench, especially down low. Malik Renew is such a force, and sometimes I do worry about him coming into the game and not providing that spark. Race Thompson, I think, with his experience, can really provide that. And going back to what he was good at a few years ago and kind of being more like Trayce Jackson-Davis can really hurt opponents. And that can be tough, especially if guys get into foul trouble and they're fouling Trayce Jackson-Davis, and you can have Race Thompson come in, who's a big of his own, and provide a problem for a bench player like that could really help Indiana. So I've been calling for lineup changes ever since last year. I don't think this year it's as obvious, considering that the starting 5 was kind of set in stone going into the season, and we figured that Miller Kopp is definitely going to start at the 3. That was kind of the only question mark, would be him or Geronimo, but Indiana needs 3-pointers, and there's no way you're going to allow anyone else other than Kopp to start at that position, and you figured the 4-5 is still going to be the same with Thompson and Trayce Jackson-Davis. So I like your point. I think this should have been maybe a question going in last year, but I'm glad someone's finally bringing it up. And I think Race Thompson, his confidence just hasn't been there. I don't like he's taking too many 3-pointers. Last year, he was much better at the end of the season making threes, which is why his percentages was, I believe, just over 25% to end the season. But I mean, this year, every time he takes a 3, I almost close my eyes and say, what are you doing, man? Like, you're not a 3-point shooter. And I like how he has the confidence to do that in the games, but you got to be hitting those shots consistently in practice in order to give you the confidence to take those in the games. And it was rewarding to see the first one go in yesterday, and he kind of gave a reaction like, wow, it finally went in, like about time. So shows me he has confidence in that shot, which helps Indiana tremendously in terms of stretching the floor. But his contribution is just not going to be the same this year, considering everyone knows Trayce Jackson-Davis is an All-American for the 2nd straight year. And this year he's dang near playing like one to start.
Absolutely. And, like once full disclaimer, it's not, I love Race Thompson as a basketball player. I love what he brings to the basketball team. But in an effort to win, an effort to try to bring a spark to him and to the basketball team, I think that change would be something that Coach Woodson should look at. Because the thing I'm looking at for Race is you come sub in for Trayce Jackson-Davis, you become the focal point of the offense for at least 3 to 5 minutes. Let's see if you can put your back to the basket, because which he's good. He's good with his left shoulder jump hook. He's explosive. He can score the basketball inside. And we had Trayce on the show a while ago. One of the first things I said to Trayce was, stop allowing people to talk to you about shooting jump shots. Go out there and be who you are. I mean, if that's not who you are, it's perfectly fine. You are an All-American without making a jump shot. So all this does is takes away your focus from what you're really good at, which is energy, effort, offensive rebound, and defensive rebound, shot blocking. And I think I've seen Trayce take 1 or 2 jump shots this year. Smart. It allows him to beat Trayce Jackson-Davis. Race did the opposite. He listened to everybody tell him, oh, you need to make threes. You need to be at the 4-man, 3-man, whatever. And now you don't see him getting those double-doubles like he used to do. Like he used to get. Those are natural. But when you're thinking about being something else, then it changes who you really are. I tell people all the time, that was my biggest problem with why I didn't have an NBA career longer than 2.5 years. It was because I was listening to people tell me, oh, you need to be a point guard. And that wasn't who I was. So when I did it, it was like, oh, well, you ain't scoring, man. What's up? Because I thought you guys want me to distribute. So that was a lesson that I learned. And for the rest of my career, I was AJ Guyton. Now, this is what I do. You like it? Let's do it. If you don't like it, let me go find me another team where they do like it. And so that's always my message to young kids who are in college or playing professional basketball. You be you. Whatever is natural to you, you be you. So I want Coach Woodson to put Race into a position where he's doing what he does naturally. Posting up, using his strength, using his girth, rebounding, putbacks, energy, playing with a smile, not worried about missing and making threes. Because that's really not who you are. We want that to become part of your game slowly but surely to help Indiana. But if I'm a coach and I'm an assistant coach sitting with Mike Woodson, I'm tapping him on the shoulder. Hey, I know you stubborn. I got a dad who was like that. A dad would always want his 2 bigs playing together because that's how they played in the 80s. They always had the 2 bigs together. But this is a different game, and we need to open this thing up. Let's put Trey in there. I don't care who you put in there. I like Trey from a standpoint that he doesn't need plays run for him to be effective. He can run pick and roll. He's great at the pick and roll lob play. He doesn't take a lot of threes. He'll shoot 1 or 2. Make it, he'll shoot another one. He can create, he can run in transition. He can guard all 4 positions, sometimes 5. So you're not losing anything, but you're gaining spacing and opportunity to put another threat on the floor who's not focused on just shooting threes and can do a wide variety of things. So I'm asking Woodson. I almost called him yesterday, like, hey man, this is it. I've been saying this for 4 years. Like, really, we have to open this floor up because we play a lot of half-court offense. That's one of the things that when I watch teams play and we're walking the ball up the court, setting up plays 90% of the time without getting a fast break, getting points off our defense, that's not a good sign for me. So I don't know what our fast break points is. I did not look at that stat, but just the eye test watching the basketball game, we're not getting those easy. Our defense is stellar, but we're not capitalizing on getting out and getting easy baskets off of it, man. So I would love for Indiana to take a look at that. If not, all right, let's keep rolling in. It's not a do or die thing, especially with our next test. Our next test, and we can briefly talk about that a little bit, man. We got Arizona coming up in Las Vegas. Do you know much about Arizona?
I do not. I do know they've always been a team that has always had one dominant big, and they've been a hugely sized team. Of course, DeAndre Ayton being the main guy, and this is a tough team out of the Pac-12 that has climbed up the rankings. Is going to be a tough test.
Yeah, so it looks like they got 2 big inside guys, Tubelis and Ballo. Tubelis is averaging 20 points, 8 rebounds a game in 27 minutes. and Ballo is averaging 19 points, 9 rebounds, and they're both forwards and playing inside. So it's going to be a great challenge for our inside guys. They also have a great backcourt of the transfer from Texas, Courtney Ramey, 14 points a game, and their confident other guard, Kirk Kriisa, he's averaging 13 points a game. So, when you look at our schedule and you look at those opportunities to compete against Final Four level teams, predicted wise, and you thought North Carolina was one of those, they came into our house, so they helped us out. But these next couple contests with Arizona and Kansas coming up, this is where you get to see the true measuring stick of where we are as a basketball team. I love the Jackson States and but that doesn't tell us what we need to know about this basketball team. Going into places like Rutgers and trying to get a win off of a great win tells us a lot about our basketball team. And these are the type of games that coaches, players, they want to see. And Arizona, like you said, they've always been a team that played with a great pace. They've always been, efficient. They've always been about scoring points, averaging, I believe, like 90 points a game. So our defense will be tested. They shoot the three well. They shoot about 37% as a team. So we got our work cut out for us defensively. What do you want to see after this great bounce back game from Nebraska when you watch the Arizona-Indiana game?
Well, it's another short turnaround. Of course, you got to fly out to Vegas, and you play a game last night with a late tip. So I'm curious to see kind of what everyone's mindset is. Hopefully, everyone's mentally, physically prepared for it. And of course, Jalen Hood-Schifino, all eyes are on him. But this is basically going to be a true road environment, more or less. You're in Vegas playing against Arizona. We know Hoosier Nation travels very well, but you would think that place is going to be packed. Right. Mostly Arizona fans. And we all talked about going into the season, the big four non-con games, Xavier, North Carolina, Arizona, and Kansas. And everyone said, well, I think win 2 minimum. And if you can go 3-1, then great, you take that and run. And now Indiana's 2-0 in those games. And you got the 2 toughest ones lined up for you. So I'm curious to see how this team plays, how they gel. This is an Arizona team averaging 91 points. Of course, non-conference, you're always playing some cupcake games, so the numbers are always going to be inflated. But 91 is still an impressive number. They blew out Creighton, a team that Nebraska blew out as well, which is interesting to note. But
wow,
playing well on the offensive side of the ball. They can shoot from 3 and they have the big. So I'm curious to see how this Indiana defense, which is their strength, goes against Arizona's offense, which is seemingly their strength so far. So it's going to be a battle of the best, and really should be a great matchup and a great test for Indiana. They've really played well, and I think they deserve to have the record they have right now with just one bad loss. And I mean, hey, I don't want to say they're playing with house money in Vegas because of their record and considering they'll be the underdog in a sense. But this has got to be a team that goes in there with confidence, got to play team defense and got to find ways to score. And it's going to be a good test for Trayce Jackson-Davis. We've seen him last year struggle at times against the bigger guys in the Big Ten. But I'm curious to see his passing has gotten so much better, AJ. That's one of the biggest things I've taken away from this year going to last, where there were times where he'd try and kick out to Miller Kopp in the corner when doubled, and it would turn into a turnover. This year, we really haven't seen that much. And you look at the North Carolina game, he didn't turn the ball over once and put up a historic stat line considering what he was able to do without turning the ball over once, which is pretty impressive. So it's important for him to really get those passes out quickly. And Indiana's going to have to hit a lot of shots, and it's going to need more from Trey Galloway, probably more from Miller Kopp. And this could be a high scoring game, but I think if you're Indiana, you want to keep it lower scoring and give yourselves a chance to win.
Yeah, this is one of those games where you have to be, when we talk about walking it up, I don't think you're going to be able to run Arizona out the gym. You got a front line that's roughly averaging 39 points and 17 rebounds a game. This is the type of game for Trayce Jackson-Davis. If you want to really, really cement yourself as a first team All-American, you dominate this basketball game and you lead these Hoosiers to a win. And, I think that obviously I believe Indiana can beat any team in the country on any given day, but it's the consistency and from our backcourt is where I'm concerned. My concern is with JHS's injury, hopefully he's back because last night, Xavier Johnson, I think he still had 6 or 7 turnovers last night. It seems as if when he's forced to be the main guy, he gets in his own head. And that's what it looks like to me from the outside. Like, man, you feel like you have to do more when you really don't. All you have to do is get the offense going, move it around, and not have these. And it'd be weird turnovers too. Ball slip out my hand, and it's like, man, what control the basketball, man. But we have to be able to control that game. Win the rebounding war, we'll have a chance. So, and we're excited about that game, man. Excited about the remainder of the season, man. So, next week we got a special guest coming. I'm not going to spoil it, but it's going to be one you haven't heard from in a long time. So, we look forward to bringing him on the show and talking Indiana basketball. Make sure you all continue to support the House of Hoosier podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, also on YouTube. You can hit my Facebook fan page up. You can see content there. You can hit me on Twitter at AJ Guyton, and you'll see content there as well. Make sure you guys continue to support so we can keep bringing you this awesome content. You got any closing remarks for Indiana fans, Mr. Platt?
You hit the nail right on the head, AJ. It's an exciting time, and we'll learn a lot about this team in about 10 days or so with Arizona and Kansas lined up.
All right, man. Thank you for joining us here on the House of Hoosier podcast. This is Austin Platt, along with me, your host, AJ Guyton, signing off. We'll see you next week. Peace.